When you have a war room situation, very often a third-party vendor will be involved because it might involve the performance of their product, or maybe it clearly does. And the issues there aren't really that specific to war rooms, but I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to complain about third-party vendors, their cooperation, how your expectations of them may be very unrealistic as far as the professionalism, intelligence, quality control that they used in developing their product, even if it's a big name company. When you're in a third-party situation in a war room and you're trying to get help, they have a whole bunch of reasons for being unhelpful, and they sort of fall into patterns, so I'm going to discuss a couple of them. You are especially screwed if you are using the software for a purpose that was not contemplated when it was designed. They have written a licensing agreement with you that basically gives you no comfort at all. Something that jumps to mind for me is some software that I have seen twice be an issue from third parties. Frankly, I don't know that it was precisely the same software, but it was software designed for one industry being used in two other industries. And that was software designed for the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry, as you can expect, does a lot of tracking of things. So when they have a new drug they contemplate testing, developing, selling, they have expensive, complex systems to track that from being a thought in somebody's head, some chemist, some doctor, some biologist in their head, to final approval by the FDA and sales. Now, I've seen this kind of software, as I say, I don't know that it was particularly the same company, used in two other industries. One was a toy manufacturer who needed to track the testing of its toys, their construction, and most particularly the chemicals used in association with that construction, from the beginning to the end. A major toy manufacturer whose name you would recognize. So they purchased this software to track the production of toys, not pharmaceuticals. And the performance was very poor once they actually entered some data in there. Another use for similar software, if not the same software, was one of what we used to call the big three auto manufacturers. The system for tracking the design and production of a vehicle from a mere concept through production was actually on many computers, most of them stuck under people's desks. This company decided it would be better to have a unified system, and so they purchased a pharmaceutical tracking system to track every aspect of design and development of that vehicle the same way you would do it with a pharmaceutical product. Now, as a lawyer, I'm telling you that this begs to have a custom contract negotiated regarding service prior to purchase and implementation of the software. But I see very little negotiation done of that type. One of the reasons that they give is that you're using it for a purpose that wasn't contemplated. Even if they knew that that's what you've contemplated, they have protected themselves by limiting their warranties in their licensing agreements. If you ask for help in addressing a certain issue to make some modifications, other customers didn't need it, you didn't ask for it, you didn't negotiate for it. You did pay a lot of money for it. Under these circumstances, they're not going to make changes just for you because they'd have to do it for everyone. They will only maintain one set of code. Now, sometimes you're going to come across things where you're going to suggest, well, indexes could make it perform better. Well, wait, you're the only one running those types of queries. How do we know? We don't know, because they are going to invoke privacy and the right to protect their intellectual property from not having to reveal to you anything that would help you analyze the situation, to understand the way their product works. They don't want to help. They've got your money, and they will say anything to keep from being helpful. Very often, they will not help you because they want to sell you a new version of the product where the problem is resolved. You have to take their word for it very often. If you try to make a change to indexing yourself, it's going to take you out of their service agreement, which you're paying a lot for. But are they really serving you very well now? I'm going to have some indexing stories to tell later on. There's one example I'll mention right now. When we talked about the application that had 40,000 users who couldn't use their email if this third-party add-on product could not be running at the same time, we had a system where the database's page life expectancy was 4 seconds. After viewing some videos, you're going to know that the rule of thumb is that we like that to be better than 500 seconds, although I even think that's a terrible metric because the shape of the graph is more important than its value. We identified that a single index would improve the performance, reduce the CPU usage from about 90% to 20%, and the company refused to let the bank implement the index because it would take them out of their service agreement. Eventually, I determined that there was a single stored procedure that was running continuously that was consuming most of the CPU, and that the output of the stored procedure was being used precisely by nothing, even in the application as it was designed. Disabling the stored procedure would have solved everything. The vendor would not permit it. They wanted to sell the new product. The business had its own problems, and one of them was because, due to some unfortunate events in the past, management made some boneheaded decision that made any change virtually impossible to implement regardless of what it was. So even if they wanted to add the index that I wanted or disable the stored procedure and the vendor let them do it, they were going to fight doing it. It's like wanting to throw a drowning person in a life preserver and they don't like the color or God knows what their reason is, but it's stupid. Why even ask for help? So I left, knowing the solution to their problem. Several months later, I did hear indirectly that they had implemented the index. The page life expectancy went from 4 seconds to 700 seconds, which essentially solved their problem. They could have solved it much easier. They could have solved it with the entry of a single SQL statement that would have solved the problem within minutes of an index being built. So here we had just incompetence and immorality all the way around. I think not helping this customer with a clear problem through the third party is not a question of law. It's not a question of contract. It's a question of morality. And they failed the morality test. Please understand, when I'm talking about these third-party vendors being uncooperative, I am not talking about feature creep. These customers were entering data in screens that were designed in the product, were querying the data using the tools provided by the product. They were having inadequate performance. And now that I'm reflecting on it, I guess the vendors were partially complaining that they didn't like the distribution of the data, the statistics involved with querying the data. They didn't like the actual queries that were being regularly run. I still am at a loss to understand. All I know is that they kept everything very private. They weren't going to do anything, and they were going to make any excuse to not do anything. It is impossible to imagine that the changes that these clients needed would not have benefited all of their other clients. And I'm just going to tack on here a story, maybe related or not. I had an engagement at the Real-Time Crime Center at One Police Plaza. In my world, One Police Plaza is part of popular culture. I'm not so sure that's true for everyone. Who had implemented some upgrades to the software he had written, and the particular system essentially stopped. He told me that Microsoft didn't say that he needed to do performance testing or any kind of testing when he upgraded his existing software. Third-party vendors will do anything to avoid responsibility. Okay, I'm being a little harsh. I'm sure there's some good ones out there. But for the good ones that were out there, I generally didn't get involved in emergency maintenance calls. So I guess my view is very skewed. Just kind of like doctors only see sick people, so they think people are sick. In any event, we'll be talking about third-party vendors and other related issues as we go along. My belief is that your expectations about how third-party vendors make software is not consistent with reality. As I review this video again, I want to add a caveat, which perhaps I ought to make more prominent on the channel, maybe a part of every video. It's much easier for me to make videos on things I am passionate about and to go into greater detail, and this very often means talking about things that piss me off. As a result, you get a great deal of opinion, and you're perfectly entitled to disagree with it. I hope you still get to think about some things you may have missed in your analyses, or that talking about it lets you know that it's okay to say the emperor has no clothes, that you can have opinions about these kinds of things. And in more fairness, I now recall a number of engagements where I have analyzed third-party applications, how they implemented indexes, server configurations, stored procedures, other object designs, where in fact the reports were taken by the third-party vendors to improve their products. And I'll be alluding to it, I'm sure, in other videos. I have seen this most commonly in the medical records industry. There are many products out there, some that may be used by some of your doctors, where the product started with vendors that we describe as working out of their garages. They're people who have a great deal of business knowledge. They know how to create intelligent user interfaces, but they don't know a damn thing about databases. And they don't discover the failures of their product until they install it at a 2,000-bed hospital. I've had numerous engagements with different medical records software, some of them more than one engagement. And this industry has seemed willing to take criticism to heart and to make changes where they are convinced it is appropriate.